Welcome back to Coachella Valley Canna Week, day 2. I've got Georg Kallert with me. Did I say that
You
correctly?
did. Thank you so much.
Oh,
It's
good.
a
I'm
pleasure
so
to be here.
glad.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Thank you for being here. This guy tried to pretend like, they weren't here earlier. I'm like, I don't think so. Um, Love the labs.
Thank you.
I'm a little nerdy lab girl. I think what you do is absolutely fascinating and completely essential to the industry as a whole, right? You are the piece that makes the politicians and the general community feel a little safer about what we're doing out here. What's it been like for you being the first and only lab out in the Coachella Valley?
We've been very blessed. It's been a unique journey. We looked it up. I think yesterday, 7 years ago, was our first COA that we released. So it feels great.
Congratulations.
Thank you. As anyone can tell you in this industry, there's lots of ups and lots of downs.
Yeah.
But I feel like we're on a very good path. And looking back, I think one of the things I heard in some of the other conversations today, we have an incredible staff, and I think that incredible staff brings a passion, and they care. And what's awesome is they care about every sample, right? Once a year, twice a year, you have to do some proficiency testing, and maybe those you think are more important. But we really look at it this way. I think every sample is important because every sample eventually ends up in some consumer's hands. So I think holistically, we're kind of the last stop. I always think about it because unless you have a COA, you can't ship your product. So we're kind of like the end of a long pipeline. And my parents, my grandparents were all in horticulture, and I never went in that direction, but somehow I came back to it. And it's fascinating because I've gotten to meet a lot of growers, and it's such an appreciation for their craft and what they do from day one, and how they set up their environments, what kind of soil or coconut or whatever they're putting their plants in, and how they cure that plant all the way to get maximum gene expression. And that process is maybe the beginning and the core, but we're kind of the edge of that process, or maybe the final stop, because we're basically kind of giving out the report card.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important part of the industry, and I think the more collaboration we have amongst all the different parts, the better.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like I said, only lab in Coachella Valley. What made you come out here? It's hot.
I remember early on, I was really influenced personally. There was a video clip going around back when video clips were much smaller online. You didn't have 4K, and it was about a gentleman who had Parkinson's disease, and after he consumed marijuana, his disease eased a lot. And internally, I felt like anything that can be done to help people is one of the most noblest things you can do. And in terms of the investors that came together, there was a lot of science background. There was a lot of interest, not just in doing the daily production, but in research on cannabis. And it's good to see that hopefully with reclassification, knock, 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 coming up soon, we can have an environment where there's more research at universities and colleges all across America, and we can understand the true benefits of this plant. And I think it's a magical plant, and I think us understanding it better and us using it for as many purposes as possible would be best. People talk about that hemp rope used to be the #1 rope until there was a synthetics lobby, and they asked to have synthetic rope, and then hemp rope fell aside, and it was cast in in the undesirable pot. And it'd be good to see that, like, I don't know, 75 years later, we've passed the devil's lettuce stage of the conversation. So
yeah, I that would be nice, wouldn't it? Safety. Let's talk lab safety. Test results are so important. COAs. It's the biggest difference. When advocating for buy licensed, right? Support our licensed dispensaries. Lab tested is the biggest argument. How in touch do you think consumers are with that? And what does Landau do to be able to allay those fears?
So we believe a lot in what you're talking about. We think it's super important that the safety is paramount. One thing that we do is on our COAs, there's a QR code. So anyone can immediately take their phone and look up and get even additional information, and also verify that the piece of paper they were maybe handed in the dispensary is legit. So that's a small step. But in the greater things, I think obviously education is power. I think there's a lot of emphasis always on potency and not enough emphasis on terpenes, right? And anyone can tell you that. And many of the growers that we've met with, all they care about the terpenes. However, I think in the market there's a lot of information that the potency has more importance. So I think whatever we can do collectively to help foster that understanding of and we talked about this earlier. There's a saying, maybe you can say growing wheat is easy, growing good wheat is hard, and growing great wheat and making money at it is like the ultimate challenge.
Yeah.
So, looking at it from that perspective, I think whatever the greater good can do to establish more commerce in, the state of California, the better it will be for any type of licensee and ultimately the consumer.
So I've been hearing about Landau Labs for a really long time. I've only ever heard good things.
Thank you.
Coming from LA, we've got a lot of lab choices out there, and there's a lot of brands that come out here to work with you. What's your secret?
I think we have, like I said earlier, a very, very passionate staff. I think we work really hard to make sure that all the customers are prioritized. Sometimes it's easier to say, well, they're a big customer, let's give them, but we care about all the customers, which is hard. Some of the smaller customers tend to maybe take more time, but we do our best.
Some of y'all are needy. I've heard those phone calls.
We try to always answer the phone. I think it's super important to have good communication. We, when needed, go out to a customer site. We help them if there's something that they think they might be having an issue with bacteria or microbials. We help advise them. We do some testing for them. We show them some products other customers use to help manage that. We were very early on HLVD and helping to have people understand how important it was. Even just the simple fact that if you use the same scalpel when you did the testing, you could be passing the disease among your plants. So I think it's just being very upfront, really working with a customer. And in theory, it's like, we have kind of three customers, right? We have our actual customers, we have the state of California, which is our customer, and we have the public, so it's important that we're just as forefront with all of them as possible.
The state of California is a fun customer.
I think it's incredible to see that a lot of progress has been made.
Yeah.
And I think every year things in the state are getting better. And I hope that, like we talked about earlier, reclassification, even just the fact that we'd have banking, that would be more straightforward. And a lot of people don't realize you can't, particularly labs are in a unique cross section because we use instrumentation and chemical products that are also used by big pharma, by blood labs, by scientific entities that have a completely different balance sheet, right? And they have a different pricing system. Versus cannabis, things tend to have to be lean because it's still of an emerging industry. So in that regard, it's hard for us even to get a big bank loan. You really can't, right? You can maybe get something small, but you're not getting anything big. And so that would only help the industry to have that kind of access to both financial security and also just the ability to help service everything we can do for our customers. Because ultimately we need them and they need us. So it's a yin and yang, maybe a symbiotic, whichever word is correct.
Yeah. Catch-22 sometimes too,
I'm
right?
sure, yes.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. Products on the market. You having that horticulturist background, or at least I don't know how much mom and dad taught you.
Dinner table
right?
immersion, yes.
Yeah, it's I tell my daughter, I just want to put it in your Rolodex, and she goes, "What's that?"
Yes, I met a 22-year-old the other day who had no idea what a Rolodex was.
Yeah,
I was blown
25,
away.
she knows what I mean. How much of that has actually come into play in you being able to run your lab?
I think it's super important to understand the greater what's happening, right? So we have a product. That product can be exposed to lots of different things. Cannabis or weed is a bioaccumulator, so it can be picking up lots of stuff along the way. And I think, as similar to growers, we'll talk about the environmentals are so important. On the lab side, we see it too. Not just the canopy itself has to be protected, but everything along the way. You just have to be smart about what you're exposing your products to. Because eventually, if you're not careful, you're going to end up with a situation. And there's always someone who's like, well, our outdoor grow was near a strawberry field and they were spraying this. And it's like, that's unfortunate, but that stuff is now in your plant, right? Yeah. Just because it happened, it sucks. But, so I think it's that kind of understanding of that we're not dealing with something that comes out of a machine that's a commodity, a widget, for the lack of a Jetsons joke, right? It's an organic product, and that organic product will be influenced by the environment it's in. And that knowledge is important to understand, I think, through the whole run of the cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, testing process.
Yeah, it's a plant. It's natural. we don't all come out the same.
Very true. And two pieces are never the same either.
No.
So.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
George, quick plug in for Coyote Crossing.
Oh, what's that?
I love coyotes. Coyotes are a very unique species. They've been in North America over 1 million years. And I think they teach us something unique, which is coexistence. And I think the thought of coexistence, I think, is something we need a lot in the world right now on many, many levels. So I'm part of a project that is telling the coyote story, which will be coming out later in April, on April 20th of all days.
Oh, cool.
So we're very blessed. So
Okay.
thank you, everyone.
Well, definitely send me the info. I'd
Yes,
love to share that
I
too.
will,
I
for
do
sure.
believe in coexistence.
Thank you,
as well.
thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.